If you think serious defense tech only happens in DC or Silicon Valley, you're already behind. And the uncomfortable part is you probably don't even realize it. Some of the systems shaping future air, space, and unmanned operations are being built in places people call flyover country. And if you're a veteran or an engineer trying to figure out where to build a real career without wrecking your family life or burning through your savings, this matters more than you think. Welcome to the Swarm News. This is the show where veterans and engineers talk about defense tech the way it actually works, not the way it looks on a slide deck. I'm Joshua Hill.
And I'm Vincent Lewis. And we like to say thank you for showing up and coming back and being a part of the podcast and YouTube channel with us. If you're not following us, please like, follow, and subscribe. We appreciate it, and it helps us out with growing the channel and getting more people out and knowing about what we do. Back to you, Josh.
Yeah, people keep calling Ohio an emerging defense tech hub. I don't really agree with that. Ohio isn't emerging, it's already embedded. It's been embedded for a long time now. The difference is people outside the community are just now starting to take notice. When you look at places like RightPat, NASIC, acquisition commands, ISR organizations, you've got intelligence, research, testing, and procurement sitting in the same region. That doesn't happen by accident. I mean, what most people miss is this: a lot of innovation looks impressive right up until it hits the real world constraints. Spectrum congestion, weather, bad data, human limits. Ohio is where systems actually get tested against reality. That's why serious programs end up here, even if they don't make the headlines. So, Vince, from the engineering side, why does this ecosystem actually work here, in your opinion?
I think because of when you look at the background of Ohio, being from here when I was growing up, Ohio was more so really known for aviation. And then the space industry back in younger days was like big because that was the big push for a lot of stuff. But when you really look at the history of the tech that's been made here, Patterson, John H. Patterson was one of the few people who started the cash register, and you have other things that happened at Right Pat being one of those main hubs, especially after aviation. Then you now have a big influx here, like in Columbus and this area of like Intel and Anduril and several other companies that are coming in and starting to make Ohio like the Midwest or the East Coast version of the Silicon Valley. So it's unknown for a lot of people that this place is growing and growing big. And there's a lot of land and open space and a lot of ingenuity here.
Yeah, so I mean, let's get real with some of this stuff. If you've ever worn the uniform, you've seen it. Systems that don't talk to each other, threat libraries that lag reality, analysts drowning in data while decisions still have to happen fast. And this isn't about blaming people, it's about consequences. When data isn't fused correctly, air crews fly with uncertainty they shouldn't have to accept. There's systems that aren't built with analysts in mind, and then speed suffers. When tools don't reflect how missions actually run, risk goes up. That's not theoretical. We've all watched this happen. And if you're in a leadership role and you allow this to happen, you're part of the problem. Instead of being yes men, listen to your people and understand that they probably have a better understanding of the software and hardware issues than you do. If you want real change and better results, find your best operators and ask them, could these systems work better, and then help these people find the ways to get their voices heard so that they can make the changes needed.
I would have to say that is something I've seen just throughout time with what I've been doing in my side. It's the opportunity to make a difference in the efficiency that goes into it. None against engineers, but sometimes I don't think they always get a chance to see what they're making being put together and or as it's getting used by the end users, because end users aren't looking at it in the same way as high level engineer. So taking that input from both sides is very necessity to the whole build of whatever it needs to be. And I've learned that from my side of, going through creating prototypes and items that a lot of people really may not be using right away, but having to think of, if I was the guy on the other end with this, how would I want to do this? Or what would I do to significantly reduce the need to have to know everything about it? And that's the critical point that anybody who does this needs to know in anything, not only just the drones. Is you look at a car, how often does it take you to have to take it to a dealership to get your car fixed for something simple, or come up with something that could have came from the company itself? So those are critical things that need to be looked at in anything, but more so, and especially the drones, we have opportunity to set those standards now, make it a high standard before or an easier standard for the everyday person, especially with the guys on the ground being the ones that need to use these systems more than the high level people.
Yeah, and I think that's what drives operators crazy, right? I mean, we don't need elegant systems. We need resilient ones. We need things that actually work the way that they're supposed to and the way that we were told they're going to work when they show up.
Yeah.
Something that degrades graceful instead of collapsing and causing issues.
Yeah, exactly. Something that's over engineered or not functional. I've seen several systems that was like created like this. Why is a frame need glue when if it breaks, you got to put this part back in or replace a part, and I can't do it without having to replace a whole frame. I've ran into several situations where I'm like, it just doesn't make sense, and it causes the inability to fix it on the fly in the field instead of, I guess the gist is design obsolescence. They're trying to make it to where you want it to be able to function as needed, but keep it to where it comes back to the company to be able to do the work. But in these systems, they need to be able to be used on the battlefield. You don't need someone to, hey, I gotta call up the engineer and say, hey bro, I gotta get a fix on this. You ain't gonna have that time in the battle. Don't give a shit. They're gonna be like, you ain't got that time, or will you have the opportunity to call? So you need to be able to make these systems be, yes, go out to them. They have the functionalities, everything they need, but if they need to fix it, it's fixable. And they can add or take away as they need to, because they're the ones in the operational need to do it right then. Not waiting for some engineer or somebody else from the company to come say, oh, this is all you need. That's not workable, feasible, or even thought to be a way that can be worked in a new way of combat thinking too. The new combat that we haven't been used to is going to be different.
Yeah, so why don't they bring in more operators to help design and help fix flaws on design of how these work? I mean, operators are the ones that are battle tested and know, like, yeah, that's great in theory, but that isn't gonna work. How do we fix this? Like, where do we go?
I think the biggest part is you need a combination of someone who has mechanical skill, who has some idea of engineering processes, and also has the on the ground skills has done it. You know, taking someone, say in this case, just something in general. Say you got a drone pilot, someone who's flying for the last few years on their own, who's taken, built them, made them, went through their lumps of figuring out, oh, it's not what you do. You break it, fix it, rework it, and then you take an engineer who has a high level of, say, electrical, how to make the motors and know the ins and out, and they could create those things. And you merge those two people together and say, hey, you two make a system. Now you have a person who flies and uses it, and a person who has the upper conceptual ideas of it. The catch to it is that a lot of times people don't want to pay the person who's the operator the same amount as what the engineer, especially when they have the same emphasis and ability to give good insight as that engineer would, because they're doing something that typically a lot of engineers aren't typically wanting to do, fly or know it. Now, granted, you can have them. Don't get me wrong. There are people out there who can, but they're not going to be on the ground level just always doing these things. You know, not out saying, hey, I'm doing this as a hobby also as a job along with it. And that's the keys that I think need to be done. But it's this industry, money. That's another part of it. How much money do we got to pay to get this done? How quick is it going to take? And is there even a feasibility to make more as this is going? That's all it
Okay.
goes to when you break it. What do you
Okay,
think?
well let's zoom in on the unmanned systems then and the counter UAS, because this isn't a future problem anymore. Near peer adversaries are using drones for ISR targeting and strikes right now. Non-state actors are doing the same with commercial platforms. And on our side, we need unmanned system that units can actually rely on, not just admire during demos. We actually need real world shit that works like we need it to and like it's actually projected to.
And I think that's the problem. That concept that you can make something work with everything. I've seen it when these tests were starting to be done with these counter systems. I've been on ranges where they couldn't see it. I've been in places where, if you really think about it, that drone is very small. And if you make it right, it can't be seen, even from a distance. So making something that's really hard to hear, hard to see, hard to be able to use a target on it. And even when you think about it, even if you try to do thermals, there's ways to mask those. So they are literally becoming one of the newer close to a stealth system than probably ever before. And then if you make it to where it can operate on its own, how do you counter all these things? You can do it, but it takes more than just one system. I think you were showing me a video today that showed the laser
100
system.
kilowatt.
Yeah, 100 kilowatt laser. I mean, I'll ask you this: what's your thoughts on that? What do you think is going to be successful? I have my ideas. I've used it. I had aircraft flown against one or a system. Maybe they've improved it. But what do you think about that? You think it's going to?
I think that's blowing smoke up people's ass to try to sell a product that's just going to fail. I mean, first off, you have to see it, you have to track it, you have to be able, I mean, seeing it's going to be the hardest part out the gate. Like, you have to be able to see the target. And even if you see it, no matter how hard you hit it, doesn't mean you're gonna hit it. I don't see any of this being realistic yet on being able to knock these out of the sky like they're saying. I think in theory, I mean, again, we're talking theory versus application. Theory is great. Application is completely different.
Yeah, because think of it, I think of it like this. If I'm the enemy and I was to try to counter a lot of this stuff, it doesn't take a lot. Everybody's thinking about air. And I don't want to put out ideas that may give someone a better thought of how to do it.
Yep.
I can put like this. There's several ways that I can already see have not been thought about that need to be considered on how to look at these systems and other ways than, hey, I have an airborne target, I need to knock it out, compared to what other situations, what other TTPs do we need to think about that aren't just like, hey, aircraft comes in, I have counter system go out after, and it brings it down in a kinetic way or electronic way or whatever. You know, honestly, the laser, I had aircraft one time was up at altitude being hit by a laser, and it came back. I was able to bring that aircraft back down to the ground.
So it had no effect.
No effect. It had effect on it. It made it smoke. Smoking coming back. We brought one back that was smoking. I mean, yeah. But it was, that was the crazy part. We got it back to the ground, and that's the key. Like, did it take it out? No. And you got to think also, lasers work on atmosphere. So if it's shooting, you got to take into consideration how far out you're going, how that laser's power is going to be adjusted. Can it be done? Yes. They do it. They have systems that will actually help them adjust their atmospheric calculations to bring that laser to the power it needs to do at whatever his distance has got to shoot. Okay.
Yeah, not to be one or the other, but I think you get a better chance of using a rail gun to get a UAV out of the air than you do using a laser. Let's just throw that out there.
Yeah, but I think that then goes into
that's a waste. That is I'm not trying to say that that's what we should be doing. I'm saying that's a waste of taxpayer money to throw that out there. However, if you want to guarantee you're knocking it out, I think that's the only way you're going to do it. It's
like using a bullet to knock out a paper plate,
right?
It's like, is it worth the round that's going out to take out the target that's hidden? You know, and that's those constant problems.
You're saying we're talking hundreds of rounds a second to, you know what I mean? Like, you're wasting a lot of money. But if you're a veteran and you're listening to this, here's why this matters to you. It matters to you personally. If you planned missions, you've ever worked ISR, you've run EW, or you've sat in a skip, you already know where systems fall apart. In Ohio, you can take that experience and influence systems early before they're locked in, funded, and impose actual change. That operator perspective is rare. And here, it's close enough to matter. You're not yelling into a void, wishing that you were actually shaping the future of how collection was done. You're actually shaping what actually gets built to make it more efficient and effective.
Yeah, and for engineers, this is an important thing to you too. You're not just building features here, you're building survivability, clarity, and you're actually saving time. These decisions you make and how the data is fused and how it interfaces and how your designs and systems fail or actually work, the descriptions, the disguises and discussions and all the other things that go into making one of these is straightforward and is a field that's needed and is also here in Ohio. Like I said, this is becoming the second Silicon Valley, and you have an opportunity to get into a place before it becomes an explosive that everybody knows about. I saw this same thing happen when I went to Huntsville, Alabama. When I was there, first getting there in 2016, it was before any of the drone stuff. I will say Huntsville is probably drone capital USA, more than probably anybody ever realized. Little Huntsville, Alabama became one of the #1 cities in the United States a few years back. And it actually has a lot of everybody here, every defense industry company in the country. They have the plus of more people with PhDs and degrees than any other city in the United States. And Ohio is like on that same level too. And we're becoming like the same way, not just for one city though. We have multiple cities though, and more capability, and it is growing to be that same way. So it's like a quiet growth that I think people really need to know. And this is where I think engineers choose the ability to have an effect that want to be a part of this can come in and do it. And that's not just marketing, that's the the reality.
Yeah, I mean, so let's land this thing and say that Ohio isn't an emerging defense tech hub like everybody's trying to say. It's already critical. Proximity to missions beats hype every time. When operators and engineers work together as they do here, systems get better and people are safer. This is something I have plenty of experience with. When I was an operator in the DGS, we would get to collaborate with the engineers as they were developing new software or hardware for the use, and being able to tell them early on why something didn't work in the early stages of the development, which was much more beneficial than us getting this new software and then there being all these red tape and hoops and things that we had to jump to when there were issues. And that just having to deal with those things and adjust on the fly was just a pain in the ass. I'm a huge believer that operators and engineers should collaborate early on to reduce issues, and operators might actually they can explain issues that they would have in live during missions so that later on there's no issues and you're not putting lives at stake.
Yeah, I have one for you. What do you think could have been something that you saw that would have been a benefit to you while you're in your time in the service? What do you wish the one biggest thing, if you had one takeaway that you can give to every company in the United States, what would you want it to be to say, hey, look, do this going forward? Because the guys in need true support more than just giving them a product.
Yeah, so with that, I think there's a couple of steps in that. First, I think the DGS, there's multiple sites. You need to get guys from each one of the sites, not just one site, and bring them in, get their information and get their inputs and opinions, because different AORs have different issues and different problem sets that they're dealing with. Bringing them all in and getting all of them set so that we're all using the same hardware, like make sure we're all getting a voice heard. And I think part of that, though, is also having your leadership be willing to let your better operators take time off to go handle this kind of stuff. Because a lot of leaders that I dealt with in the past were like, no, 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 we can't lose so and so. So let's just send this guy who's a pain in our ass. We're going to send off like Joe Schmo to go do this stuff because we don't want to deal with him, and it gets him out of our hair for a week. Instead of sending your top operators who could actually make a difference in the software. I think those were some issues that if those were focused on, I think you'd see quick change and good solid changes.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you on that too, because I think that and now in an era where you have Zoom, you have Team, you have multiple things where you don't have to, and it's been around.
Yeah.
It's been around to where it isn't just now. It was there 10 years ago. I remember being on a video call with the PM as I'm doing a maintenance meeting, going over stuff for my MQ5 Bravo, the system we were working on, getting parts for it, working S3. So it's the part of getting the opportunity to get these guys in the door and say, hey, look, this is what I see as a problem, and then being efficient. Because that's the problem with these big companies. They are not fast.
No.
Like the streamlining and government, the problem is the government streamlining and not being so stuck in this is what it has to be. If a company can say, hey, we're giving you back $20 million or $5 million because we figured out a better solution, that should be, we need to keep that company in consideration, especially now since they were able to find ways to save money and give it back versus like, you didn't use it all. Well, we're not giving you another contract with that because you didn't fulfill what you're supposed to spend it. You overbid your contract. That's stupid. I think those are the dumbest things that happen. And because of these companies taking consideration their way of methods of working it versus being efficient, which is why we have these spending costs that are over fucking top. There should be a place to where efficiency and reduction of cost, but still bringing in a profit is the priorities versus just putting the information out there and saying, hey, here's something to work. I still can believe it with when I look at the Patriot system when I was back working on it. Like, I love that system and I put a lot of time and I love working on it, but it was just like, man, this could be way better. But it was just the task of what they were given and what they were doing, R&D, obsolescence, again, making money in the future, and what they had to work with, what government requirements were. So could things be better? Yes. I honestly think that this, kind of going back into Ohio, we have an opportunity in this state to actually make differences. And there's a lot of things that came out of here that people don't realize that make a difference worldwide, not just nationally, but all over the world. Airplanes being one, cash registers another. There's like Wright Pat, just look up the history of Wright Pat and everything that's about that place. And even Cleveland, there's significant people. So not to take away from the topic, but I think we really have an opportunity for everyone that's coming in to do things.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. If this episode hits home for you, don't just listen. Send it to one person trying to figure out what comes next, a veteran, an engineer, someone still chasing hype on the coast. Next episode, we're breaking down why most defense startups fail before they ever land their first real contract. We'll see you then.